Before we begin, if you want to win one of these games, all you need to do is leave comments as you normally would. I'll be picking someone in the coming days, so make sure you've got your notifications switched on. There's no doubt the Switch has some amazing games. We're going to have a look at 10 of the most addictive new ones from all sorts of different genres, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a few in here you've never heard of. My name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. What are the most addictive new games on Switch? Well, let's find out. First up, we've got Imagine Earth, which is a real-time strategy game where you have to build up a civilization, attempting to use your resources wisely, whilst gradually colonizing a planet, meeting a series of objectives and trying to fight back sometimes against rival factions. It's really fun, this one. You have to focus on your infrastructure, different trade routes, but also having that sustainable production. What's cool is that it doesn't ram the message down your throat that you're wasting resources, and it makes it abundantly clear that, look, you have to burn coal at the start or you're not going to have any power. We don't have enough strategy games on Switch, and I was really pleased with how this one ran, and it's just had another patch that improves things massively. I think the only thing I don't like about it are some of the character designs for those little images that you see. They just look a little bit lifeless. The same definitely can't be said for the world itself, and they've managed to make the controls actually work really nicely. You've got a couple of different modes here. There's a full campaign, which includes a storyline for you to go through. Certainly one to consider if you see it go on sale. Next up then, we've got Insurmountable, which was developed by Byte Rocker Games and published by Daedalic. The idea of this really intrigued me. Now, I have to say I am a rock climber in real life as well, so I was a bit confused about how they would turn that into a roguelike, but it's very cool. Now, essentially, the goal is very simple. You just have to reach the top of the mountain, but you choose your path on these hexagonal grids. You've got different characters with different skill sets, and they also have their own backstories. And as you move up the mountain, you have different story things that take place. You might stumble across someone, and it'll give you a choice as to what you want to do. Sometimes it will reward you, but the wrong choice will hinder your progress, even causing you physical harm. I love the way the narratives play out as you progress. It's not something I expected to see, and it's also not stupidly difficult. I managed to reach the top of the first mountain, although I have to say it was by the skin of my teeth by the time I finally got to the top, and using things like different bits of climbing gear that are perishable and taking those risks to go sometimes a longer route. They really do feel rewarding. It manages to encapsulate that one more run feeling in something that's entirely fresh from my perspective, at least in the roguelike genre. Then things crank up a notch in terms of the addiction levels, and it's Musashi vs Cthuluuuu, developed by Cyber Rhino Studios, and it released on Switch a few weeks back. You play as a famous warrior within feudal Japan, and that's the complexity over. This is very simplistic, but man is it addictive. You use the D-pad, the left, up and down, to strike enemies with those red growths on them. That lets you know which direction you need to attack. And then if they're coming from the right of the screen, you use X, A and B to do the same, high, middle and low. It might seem like a very simplistic premise, and sure it certainly is, but the challenge ramps up as more enemies approach and different varieties. Some of them will need 2 hits. If you press the wrong button, then you're going to take damage. And if you forget to press a button, then again, there's a window for them to do damage to you. Now the strategy comes from the little lantern that you hold in your possession. Once that's charged up, you need to wait for a window to activate it, because it takes a few seconds to do so, and my goodness, that's difficult. Once you do though, it offers you 1 free hit, so if you take any damage, you won't take any damage, if that makes sense. All of this, of course, is gaining you a higher and higher score. It gets more frenetic as you try and push onto those global leaderboards. A proper little hidden gem, this one, well worth checking out. That's Musashi vs Cthuluuuu. Next up, we have The Lands Beneath Us. This one was developed by Fairplay Studios and published by PID Games. This is like a roguelike action game that feels a bit like Cadence of Hyrule or Crypt of the Necrodancer. Essentially, when you move, the enemies do as well. Sometimes you'll be fighting a boss and you'll see an area where it can attack, and you kind of have to jump in and out. You can also press a button to wait a turn to allow them to do their damage somewhere where you're not, and then you can move in for hopefully some damage. While the premise sounds simple, because on the face of it you can just sit and plan out your moves, it's a little bit like chess in that you also have to take into account environmental objects. so as not to put yourself into a corner where you can't get out. There's the typical mechanic of choosing one of 3 different items in certain areas, and on some runs, sure, there's a bit of RNG because you're going to get an item that just blows the game apart, but that's kind of where the loop of enjoyment comes from. But here it isn't fully RNG, it's very much about your personal skill, which I very much appreciate. Not a game that I'd even heard of until this time last week, when a friend of mine in the publishing world basically said, hey look, check this out, it hasn't had any coverage, and man, I haven't been able to put it down. Cracking game. The first party option for you then, I think one of the best first party games we've had in a long time. It's Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. You may not think addictive when you think of a game like this, but it's such a smooth and enjoyable experience. It really is Nintendo at their finest. I loved it back on its original platform, and sure, it was better at 60 FPS in some regards, certainly in combat, but the gameplay holds up brilliantly still. And I love how you unlock different paper things. For example, you can turn yourself into a paper aeroplane to fly across small gaps. There are 8 large chapters to work through as well. This isn't a small game. You can easily spend over 35 hours if you want to find, see and do everything, and there's a reason it's a fan favourite. If you're after a good experience to just sink some real time into and feel like that time is actually, well, worthwhile I guess, then do consider Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. No Man's Sky is the gift that keeps on giving. They've just released their latest update, which adds the ADRIFT expansion. This is an entirely new expedition. You can play it from the main menu, just select it and go into a new expedition that has its own storyline tied to it and sees you stranded on a planet. For me, with giant Dune-like sandworms popping up out the ground every 5 minutes. You'll be repairing your ship, heading off out on an expedition that will also gain you a brand new ship and a load of other rewards as well. These days, No Man's Sky updates are almost like entirely new adventures, and let's be honest, there are a lot of companies that would charge top dollar for each and every one. Here, they're completely free, and although I do find it very compelling, I also find No Man's Sky quite relaxing, so a slightly different choice to consider there. That one obviously was developed and published by Hello Games. I really struggle to pronounce this next one. Is it Xuan Sword 7? Probably not, apologies. But this is a co-development between Softstar and Domo Studios, and it's an action RPG, and I had never heard of it before at all. There are certainly similarities to games like The Witcher here. Not as good as that game, it has to be said. The open world just isn't as fleshed out. But what is the story. It's a brilliant story whereby you're trying to restore your sister. She essentially almost gets killed at the start, and this is like in the first minute. And then you side with a powerful being that removes her soul, and she follows you around like a ghost. And then yeah, throughout the narrative, you're trying to get her body back. It's fully voice acted. It is voiced in its native Chinese with English subtitles, but even though I don't speak the language, I can really tell that these are good performances. The weakest aspect on Switch are the visuals, but if you like a good action RPG, this is certainly one I found difficult to put down. Another one in that same vein in terms of difficult to put down is the solo developed by Billy Basso, Animal Well. I'm sure you've heard loads about this, and look, I didn't rate it as highly as some people were saying it was like an all-time masterpiece up in the 10 out of 10 category, but it was still very good. And the thing I noted about it was I couldn't put it down. From start to finish, I played this through almost in one sitting. If you're not sure what it's all about, well, it's a free roam Metroidvania where you unlock a number of different skills, but you can choose the order you do that. For me personally, I got the frisbee early on, and with that you can distract things like the dogs, and you can also ride on it across gaps. But other people did things entirely differently and got like the bubble blower, and I think the way that you get those will also change the way the game feels, because certainly the frisbee for me made it a lot easier. I don't know how I would have got away without it. Throw in the fact that it's designed to be played through more than once, so once you finish the game there's post-game content, a very atmospheric experience, and I personally think it looks absolutely stunning. I've recently gone back to Vampire Survivors with the new release of Vampire Survivors Operation Guns. You must own the base game, but it's essentially a crossover with Contra, and unironically, well no, ironically actually, it's better than most of the Contra games we've had on Switch. There are loads of new weapons added in here, with 22 new evolutions. If you know your Vampire Survivors, my goodness, that's a ton to do. There are 11 new characters, I believe, the ones you'd expect, Bill Reiser, Lance Bean, but they've managed to capture the Contra feel with the Vampire Survivors Bullet Heaven gameplay. If you've not played these, you essentially just try and avoid enemies. Your weapons automatically shoot, and then you gradually get more powerful, and you can choose levels and random weapons, and then build those up, and there are synergies between the ones you select to get even more powerful. By the end of it, you've got a million enemies attacking you. It's absolute chaos, but the thing with Vampire Survivors is it also supports up to 4 players in local co-op, and it's just glorious. It really is glorious, but it's very difficult to put down. If you've got the base game, I highly recommend Operation Guns, which is out right now and will just cost you $2.49 or your regional equivalent. So then that takes us on to our last game, and this is by far one of the most addictive games I've played in a very long time, and it's completely free. It's Star Wars Hunters. I honestly didn't think I'd be saying this, but I haven't put it down. I really haven't. My daughter and I have been playing it continuously day in and out. It's just so nice to have a hero shooter. I'm a massive Star Wars nerd at the best of times, but the way they've balanced out the classes is brilliant. So for example, something like the Wookiee, he's really powerful and can smash and bash and whatnot, but if you play as the right class, you can dominate him. The same can be said for the Jedi. In the right hands, yeah, they're really powerful, but one shoulder-mounted rocket to the face and they're done for. The sniper class is brilliant, the gyro on the Switch works excellently, and they even went to the effort, I guess, of including 2 different gyroscope modes, so you can have it where you twist the joycons, move the camera, or you literally point it like a laser pointer, or you just don't use it at all. There are a variety of different game modes as well, and look, I do have a few criticisms about it, as I'll go into in a minute, but you've got things like a 25 kill team deathmatch. There's a mode that sees you capturing points and trying to hold them, and there's one that's essentially like the briefcase in other games where you hold on to that item and try and keep it away from the enemy, and another where the point that you're trying to capture just moves around. I actually hate that mode, I have to say. I absolutely hate it. I always lose that. Now it does keep track of all your wins and losses, and there's a ranked mode where you gain 200 points if you win and you lose I think 50 if you lose, but you can mitigate some of the loss of points by actually doing well. Now here's the problem I have. I think if you come first on your team, you shouldn't lose any of your, I think it's RP. Also, the points given for different things aren't high enough. So if you're a medic class and you're assisting people constantly, the amount of points you get at the end of a round for those assists is just negligible, and almost always the best healer in the world is coming last. And it's just not a nice feeling. At the moment, you get most of your points for the direct kills. Even when it's like capture a point, sure you do get some decent currency for that, but I feel like it's not quite balanced out there yet. They really do need to tweak the amount of points you're getting for each area. Now there are things like battle passes. There are lots of what are called quests. They're essentially just get X number of kills with a certain character or weapon, just to keep things interesting, and you'll gain some of the game's in-game gold currency. Now I have to say, this is where the wheels go a bit wobbly. The in-game currency, the gold coins, you can't use them for anything at all. It's completely pointless. There's literally nothing to buy, which is stupid. The diamonds, you've got these purple diamonds, they're for obviously cosmetics, but you can also unlock the Jedi and some things early if you want to. I will say that unlocks are generally quite quick, but again, the diamond currency can't buy everything, which is just stupid, so yeah. If you can get past the fact that it has that free-to-play front end, the game is really good. Like, far better than it has any right to be. I don't know why Disney haven't done a full paid version of something like this in the past, but there's a recipe here, yeah, for something great, and it's easily been the game I've been playing and hooked. So that's it. Hopefully there are 10 games there that you can really sink your teeth into, and a lack of money cannot be an argument here because number 1 is completely free. Let me know yours in the comments. I'm sure there have been a few that have slipped by. I would love to go check some of those out, and as I said at the start, if you want to win one of these, obviously not Star Wars one, just leave your comments down below and we'll pick someone in the coming days. For all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys!